Okay, this chapter 5 is about cell division and specifically how that cell division happens so that each cell will have an exact copy of the DNA. You can see here in this picture two lung cancer cells dividing. And cancer cells are great cells to watch divide because, of course, cancer cells divide all the time. But this shows you two cells that are just about finished with their cell division. All right. Multicellular life refers to organisms that have more than one cell to them. And almost every organism that you are familiar with are multicellular. For example, trees, plants, your dog, your cat, your brother, okay, all multicellular. And once you are multicellular, then all of your cells may be divided into cells that do specific kinds of work. Look here at this plant, and you can see that the leaf cells are differentiated, or they have differentiation is a fancy word for they have a specific job. You've seen these cells in leaves, and they have things like chloroplasts, and they have their cell walls, and they have their tissue. There's some areas that might be vascular tissue, see, that have more hollow regions of that allow the sap to go down to the roots and allow the water to go up. And some of the cells from the embryo of a plant will turn into primary root and lateral roots. Now, you might be more familiar with tissues and organ systems, say, in people. So let's talk about specific cells that would be blood cells. Blood cells are a specific kind of cell that carries nutrients and oxygen to every cell in your body. Now, several of these blood cells would gather together in your blood, and we would call that blood tissue. And they would travel along in your bloodstream, carrying oxygen and nutrients to um, all the other cells in your body. So we would call this grouping of blood cells tissue. All of the cells do the same job. Now, if you group several different tissue types together, you end up with an organ. An example of an organ would be a heart, which has several different tissue types that work together to make your heart pump. And then several different organs may come together to make an organ system. For example, your circulatory system, which has a heart and has lungs and has blood vessels and white blood cells and red blood cells, etc. Okay, so I hope you have a feel for this main point, which is that multicellular life is any kind of organism with more than one cell. And once you have more than one cell, each of those cells will have a different job to perform. Okay, so these specialized cells perform specific functions. For example, here's some skin cells that have a specific function to join tightly together and keep out germs. And then your bone cells, of course, they maintain your skeleton. Your intestinal cells, you can see these are highly folded so that there's a lot of surface area to absorb nutrients from the food that you have digested. Now, how does a cell know what kind of cell it's going to become in the future? That has to do with where it ends up in an early embryo. And let me show you what this means. Some of this stuff is a little bit advanced. So those of you who like advanced information, I hope it sparks your curiosity. And others, if it's really difficult, don't worry too much. I'm just trying to explain how a cell gets to a specific location in an embryo and then figures out what kind of a job it needs to do. Now let's start by looking at a fertilized egg. A fertilized egg has all 46 chromosomes that the adult with trillions of cells are going to have. And every single one of the trillions of cells in your body have the exact same DNA as every other cell in your body. And they're all the same DNA that was in the original fertilized egg that made you. Now this fertilized egg is going to divide in half, and then in half again, and pretty soon you see 4 cells, and then more cells, etc. So it just divides and divides and divides until there are hundreds of cells in this later embryo. And here's another picture. A zygote is a fancy word for a fertilized egg. Here's the 2-cell stage, the 4-cell stage, etc. And any of these cells in here, say up to this point, can be, well, any of these early cells, maybe in the 2-cell and 4-cell stage, can be used to make any other cell in your body. Right now, they're just taking the fertilized egg and making some cell divisions, and later on, these cells will differentiate. And before they differentiate, they're called stem cells and can become any cell in your body. All right, so how do these cells now, at this point, we've got hundreds of cells that have gathered together in this ball, and how do they know which cells are going to become in your future body? What happens is once we get to this stage, it's called the hollow ball stage, where you've got a lot of cells and you've got this hollow section here. All of the cells will change position, kind of like a Chinese water drill or fire drill, where these top cells will move to the bottom and the inside cells are going to move around, and these red cells are going to spread themselves around. So see how they're moving. How they're moving is not important, just that they move. And then finally, this is how they end up. It's still a hollow ball of cells, and there's these cells now, based on their position, will become specific cells in your body. The blue ones, the ones that are colored blue here, are the outside cells. They're also known as ectoderm. Ectoderm, according to your book, will become your skin, which is on the outside of your body, the nerves that are right underneath your skin, as well as your brain and spinal cord. Okay, so just by virtue of the position on the outside of the embryo, that's what these cells are going to become. Now the red cells in the middle, your book calls mesoderm, and these cells can become bones, muscles, kidney, and some of the other organs. Then finally, the internal cells, whatever cells find themselves in the center of this embryo after everything's moved. See how it's yellow here in this picture. Your book calls this your endoderm. The endo means internal, and they become your internal organs like your pancreas, lungs, and your digestive system. So ectoderm is the outside, the endoderm is inside, and the mesoderm is in the middle. Okay, that position determines what kind of cell it's going to differentiate into. Here's just all of the embryonic cells and their movement together. And stem cells have the ability to divide and renew themselves, stay undifferentiated, and develop into a variety of specialized cell types. For example, this stem cell could either divide and become 2 stem cells, or it can divide and one of them will still be a stem cell and the other will become a specialized cell. There are 3 kinds of stem cells that we can get. The first kind is totipotent, and toti sounds like total. That means the totipotent cell can become any cell in your body. This is a fertilized egg, and maybe the first or second division of a fertilized egg is totipotent, and any cell in your body it can become. The second kind of cell that's a stem cell is called pluripotent. Pluri means a lot, but not total. Pluripotent is, for example, in that hollow ball of cells, the inner cell mass, which can become almost any cell, such as these, neuron, skin, muscle, etc. Okay, pluripotent, most cells, not all of them. And finally, multipotent, which refers to adult stem cells, are specific adult stem cells who become only closely related cells. And we'll learn more about that in the next video.